Hello and welcome to Two Wheel Lifestyle. Today I'm going to be doing a walk around / review of the BMW F700GS. A couple of people have been asking about the new red bike in my videos, and I'm going to cover it this way. This model has been out for a while. So for this review, I'm going to cover the basics later in the review. I'm presuming you probably got that info from another review. I'm going to start by talking about what kind of bike this really is. I'm going to throw in an open letter to BMW. I will cover how this bike compares to its competition. Then I'll talk about some of the basics of the bike, the accessories, and then I'll sum everything up. I know that's a lot. This is meant for people who are really trying to figure out if this is the right bike for them. So I'm going to put an index in the description, so if you want to skip around to different sections in the video, you can do that easily with the links. By the way, this is my bike. It's not a loaner like I've done with most of my other reviews. I want to do my best to remain unbiased. This is not a woohoo, look at my awesome new bike, you know you want it video, but rather a video from someone who's lived with the bike for, well, let's say I've had about 12,000 miles now. I do like the bike. I'm going to give it a favorable review, so just be aware of that. So what kind of bike is this? I want to start there because I think there's a little misconception of this bike in the market. And let's start by talking about the last two letters of the model number, GS. It's almost too bad that BMW calls this bike a GS because it's the most street-oriented of all the GS models, and because of that, a lot of potential buyers look at it as a lesser or lower-end GS. To those that like the bike, it's more like a naked bike or a standard bike or even a street fighter, I know that's a stretch, with a little dirt bike DNA in the gene pool. It has a 19-inch front wheel, it has a tight turning circle, a long travel suspension, and that all add personality to a street bike. But as far as the off-road riding goes, this bike is truly off-road capable. You can stand on the pegs comfortably all day. The center of gravity is low because the fuel tank is in the back under the seat, not up front. Up front, where the tank usually is an airbox, so that really lowers the center of gravity for the bike and makes it much more friendly off-road. But in stock form, this bike is pretty much limited to smooth dirt roads. The travel that is so nice on the street is too soft and too short. It bottoms out easily and heavily. It is a big bike off-road, like most BMWs. If you ride this bike off-road, everybody will ask you how much it weighs. I tell them it's 400 to 500 pounds. It really doesn't matter. It's way heavy compared to a dirt bike. But it can go off-road. You can fix the off-road travel situation with aftermarket parts, but I wanted to review the stock bike. Speaking of GS's, I took a look at the 800 and took a test ride side by side when I chose this bike. If you have the chance to do that, you should. They're very different bikes. The 700 is fun in the corners. Cornering the 800 on a twisty road is like trying to tip over a stepladder. It's a much taller bike. You get used to it. But a lot of people, I think, select the 800 because it has 10 more horsepower than the 700. And I'll tell you this, that's the least of the differences between the two bikes. I say you should only get the 800 if you legitimately plan on taking it off-road on something rougher than dirt roads. Because if you don't, you've given up a lot of fun street handling for the sake of off-road capability. Speaking of which, it's time for that open letter I mentioned. Dear BMW, please bring this model to the US with more horsepower. I would love to see it with the engine tuning you put on the F800 GT, which is the same motor. In my dreams, you would figure out a way to take the motor from the Husqvarna Nuda 900R and put it on this platform, since the two bikes do share the same chassis and motor foundation. F900 GSR has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Here in the US, we don't have license categories based on power or displacement. Here it makes no sense that the street version of this bike has less power than the dirt version. If you need some clarification on this, please contact Triumph or Ducati. It's not that the bike needs more power or more power would make much of a difference in the bike itself, except for the 900R version. But if the bike had more power, buyers in the US would understand this bike and see it in a whole new light. Sincerely yours, Two Wheel Lifestyle. Alright, now that is out of the way, if you're considering this bike, you should look at some of its competition. And let me kind of run down who I think they are and have maybe a quick 1 or 2 sentence comparison for each one of them. I would say this bike's competitors are the Triumph Tiger 800 non-XC version, the Suzuki V-Strom 650, the Kawasaki Versys 650, and the Honda NC 750X. All those are the US models. There may be different versions in other countries. Of that list, the Triumph is the closest, I think, to the BMW. If the extra horsepower is important to you, it's the way to go. The Tiger features a butter-smooth triple as opposed to BMW's parallel twin, and the Triumph puts out noticeably more power. The trade-off is fuel economy. The Tiger is also noticeably more thirsty than the BMW, and it has a high fuel tank, carries its weight higher off-road. The V-Strom is also a strong contender against the BMW. It's been around for a long time and been refined over the years, and it gets great reviews for its V-twin. All these bikes in this list are jacks of all trades. I would say the V-Strom's strength, though, is more oriented at touring. It too has a higher center of gravity, but people do take the V-Strom off-road. The other two bikes are more street-oriented. The Versys 650 is the way to go if you want more sport bike influence. It has the heart of the Ninja 650 with that motor, which is a high RPM, punchy output kind of a power plant, unlike most of the other bikes in this group. Although it is outgunned by the bigger displacement 800, it has a very different character. And finally, the Honda NC 750X is, since it is a Honda, guess what? It's the most practical of the bunch. It's the lowest on power by a big margin. It has nice internal storage. It sips fuel amazingly. It's what I would call the commuter of this group. It can even be had with an automatic transmission. So against all of those competitors, why did I choose the BMW? Well, the F700GS is, to me, a bike that's greater than the sum of its parts. I'll get into what those parts are next, but it does everything well and nothing badly. It's a jack of all trades, and it's pretty darn good at all of them. It's the most off-road oriented of all the bikes, but even if you don't care about that, it leverages those off-road strengths well on the street, being very maneuverable and easy to handle. You want versatility and practicality while still being fun and having decent power? That's this bike's sweet spot. This is where I'll talk about some of the basics, but from the perspective of someone who's owned the bike for about a year. You'll notice, if you listen to the competitive comparison, the motor didn't fare that well. It's a great motor, and BMW, I think they had specific goals for this motor, and it's met them. It's narrow, compact, light, torquey, flexible, and delivers high fuel economy for its power range. The torque comes in at low RPMs, so much so that revving this bike to redline is not only pointless, it's annoying. It gets vibey at high RPMs and doesn't really make great noises. The suspension is long travel for a street bike and makes it super comfortable. So what are the features that makes this bike sort of a mini tourer? The rear suspension is adjustable for preload with an external knob. The front is a non-inverted telescoper that's not adjustable at all. I'm around 200 pounds and it handles pretty well for me. If this bike has a long suit, it would be the brakes. The F700GS got dual Brembo binders in front compared to the F650GS twin it replaces. Speaking of traction control, I've ridden this bike in rain a few times, and the TC was very welcome. It allows you to get off the line in the wet as hard as you want. You know the rear will not slide around or spin out. Which leads us to more electronics, like the electronic on-the-fly rear suspension adjustment. BMW calls theirs ESA on this bike. I'm sorry, but I don't feel it makes a big difference, if any, between the sport, normal, and comfort modes. I know it works well on the expensive models. I hope BMW will expand its function or range or whatever on this bike in the future. Or maybe mine just doesn't work. This bike also features TPMS, tire pressure monitoring system. It lets you check the tire pressures by a gauge on your cluster, so you don't have to check it at the gas station or by pulling over all the time, which is something I do if the road surface feels strange. I don't want to ride with low front tire pressure especially. So it's a great convenience and safety feature. A note on styling: this category of practical multi-purpose bikes is not going to be as sexy as a super sport, let's be honest. But the changes BMW made between the 650 twin and the 700 definitely give it more of a curvaceous street style. I get compliments on it everywhere I go, and the red color is a deep metallic with a gold highlight, but at the same time the bike almost looks maroon in the shade. But BMW has really put some effort into the appearance of this bike. As far as accessories and other parts, the comfort saddle is a huge improvement over the stock saddle. Now, the stock saddle is long and narrow, lets you move back and forth more, which is important for off-road handling. But the comfort saddle lives up to its name. It's an all-day seat. If you're not going to take this bike off-road, I really recommend getting the comfort saddle. This bike has the BMW skid plate and crash bars. The skid plate is light and gives great protection even up front around the oil filter and a long ways to the bike and back. The crash bars are minimalist. Most aftermarket versions offer better coverage. I'm not a big fan of BMW handguards. They offer road crash protection but little wind protection on the freeway. I also have a full set of Vario luggage for the bike. It's expandable, easily keyed to the ignition, and form-fitted to the bike. But it's heavy, and the Vario feature reduces its capacity a lot. The top case cannot hold a full-face helmet, for example. And if you want to put a full-face helmet in one of the side cases, you have to expand it. So to sum up, the BMW F700GS is an all-rounder that includes real off-road ability while still being a kick to ride in the twisties, and manages to pull off the trick of delivering a torquey, powerful motor while keeping fuel economy high. If those features are on the top of the list of what you're looking for in a bike, you should check out this bike. So, until next time, I'll see you all out there on two wheels.
Holy Good yelling, this mother! That sound alone! Oh my God! Oh no! Oh, what a sound! Ah! Wow! All right.